Hello and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For this week's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the harrowing case of the Lin family from Sydney, Australia. Min Lin was born on the 28th of July 1963 in Fujian, China. His future wife Lily was born less than 2 years later on the 13th of February 1965. Min and Lily both independently left China to live in Australia when they were students. They met in Sydney in the late 1980s, fell in love and started to build a life together. The couple had 3 children, a daughter named Brenda, who was born in 1994, and then 2 sons, Henry and Terry, who were born in 1997 and the year 2000 respectively. Min opened a newsagent's and poured his heart and soul into this business, working extremely hard to provide for his family. Every day without fail, he was at the mall serving customers in his shop. The Lin family lived in North Epping. It's a quiet suburban part of Sydney, together with Lily's sister, Irene. They were a close family and the children had a happy childhood, surrounded by extended family. After the Lin family found their success in Australia, they wanted to make sure that the rest of their family was taken care of as well. Min helped his parents make the move from China to Australia. His parents settled in Marylands, approximately half an hour from North Epping. Additionally, his sister Kathy and her husband Robert Z had made the move from China to Australia, and they lived around 300 metres away from the Lin's house. On the morning of the 18th of July 2009, Min's sister Kathy received a call from a worried customer. They were asking about the newsagents. It had not opened that morning, which was extremely unusual because Min was so reliable. Kathy and Robert decided to visit Min to see what was happening. When they arrived at the house, the front door was unlocked, and when they went inside, it was soon clear that something terrible had happened. At around 9 a.m. that morning, Kathy called the emergency services by dialing 000. It was clear in that call that Kathy was in a frantic state and unable to clearly communicate with the dispatcher, who immediately sent the ambulance and the police services to the scene. Once the authorities arrived, they found Kathy alone in front of the Lin family home. Robert had gone to collect Kathy and Min's parents from their home in Marylands. The paramedics and police walked into a horrific crime scene. The walls were covered in blood, and the first responders soon realised that no one in the house was still alive. 2 bodies were found in the main bedroom, and a further body was found in a bedroom further along the hallway. In the beds in the children's rooms, a 4th and 5th body were discovered. The faces of the victims had been so disfigured by the brutal attack that it was not possible to immediately confirm their identities. But, as suspected, the bodies belonged to 45-year-old Min, 43-year-old Lily, Lily's 39-year-old sister Irene, and Min and Lily's 2 sons, 12-year-old Henry and 9-year-old Terry. It was later concluded from the evidence at the scene that the 2 boys had been killed last and had tried to fight back against their killer. Brenda, the couple's 15-year-old daughter, was not in the house. Brenda was on a Year 10 school trip with Cheltenham Girls High School visiting New Caledonia. Before she could be located and officially told about what had happened to her family, one of her school friends saw the news on Facebook. This was how Brenda found out that her entire family had been murdered. She immediately flew back to Sydney. It was established that the crime had taken place during the night while the family were asleep. Robbery was soon ruled out as a motive, as the house wasn't ransacked and nothing had been stolen. Locks and windows were intact, suggesting that whoever killed the Lin family had a key or knew them personally. The family had been bludgeoned with a heavy object, but a murder weapon was not found at the scene. After examination of the victims, it was determined that the killer probably used a hammer, and also that 4 of the 5 victims had been asphyxiated before being bludgeoned. 24 identical footprints were found throughout the house with a shoe size of between 8.5 and 10.5, indicating that there was only one attacker. This also supported the theory that the attacker knew the family, as there was no blood or bloody footprints in Brenda's room, presumably because the killer knew that she was not in the house at the time of the murders. There were no fingerprints found, only smudges in the blood, suggesting that the murderer wore gloves. On the 8th of August 2009, a funeral service was held at the Badgerry Pavilion at Sydney Olympic Park with hundreds of people in attendance. 15-year-old Brenda attended with her Aunt Kathy and Uncle Robert. With Brenda having nowhere to go, Kathy and Robert took her in. The Z family soon became Brenda's legal guardians, and they also took over the running of Min's newsagent business. Meanwhile, the police continued to investigate. After analysis of all the evidence, they ruled out a random attack, with the evidence pointing to a family member or friend. They began to look closer at Kathy and Robert. Robert and Kathy had originally settled in Melbourne when they had arrived in Australia. They opened a restaurant, but this business failed, at which point they moved closer to Kathy's family in Sydney. It soon became clear that Robert was annoyed by the lack of respect that he was given by members of their extended family, particularly in comparison to Min. During police interviews, Robert appeared to be very anxious. On the other hand, Kathy was calm and gave investigators straight answers. She provided an alibi for her husband at the time of the murders, confirming that he had been at home with her. However, even with this alibi, they did not cross Robert's name off of the suspect list. A surveillance operation followed, where the police installed cameras in the Z household looking for suspicious activity. And they found something quite strange. In May 2010, Robert was seen tearing up a shoebox and flushing the pieces down the toilet. The shoebox belonged to some Asics trainers that were a perfect match to the footprints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, they were a size 9.5. Learning that Robert had cleaned his garage on the morning after the murders led to increased suspicion, and 10 months after the murders, a forensic examination of the house uncovered a tiny drop of blood in the garage. Analysis confirmed that this small drop of blood contained the DNA of 4 of the 5 victims. Just by itself, this wasn't rock-solid evidence, because it was already known that Robert had entered the Lin household when he and Kathy had discovered the murders. As they continued to build their case, it would take another year before the police were in a position to arrest Robert Z. He was taken into custody at around 9 a.m. on May the 5th, 2011. He was denied bail and his trial was set for September 2013. In July 2013, 2 months before the trial was due to start, it was then changed to March 2014 by the Supreme Court of New South Wales. At the time, no reason was publicly given for this delay. In May 2014, it was reported that Robert had told a fellow prisoner, who would later become known as Witness A, that he had bought the hammer that he used in the attack in a $2 shop, as this particular shop only had dummy CCTV cameras. He also stated that he planned to use DNA to implicate someone else for his crimes. This information was used by the prosecution at trial, but the defence discredited it on the basis that Witness A was a serial offender who had spent most of his life in prison. This witness had also been offered a substantial reduction to his own sentence in exchange for his testimony. The trial eventually began in August 2014, but then had to be aborted due to the judge's health issues. A new trial began in February 2015. The prosecution presented a solid case against Robert. He had a key to the Lin's house and had been seen attempting to dispose of a shoebox for shoes which matched the bloody footprints. Furthermore, he left the crime scene to pick up his in-laws, which the police suspected he used as an opportunity to throw away the murder weapon. Not to forget that Robert knew that Brenda was on a school trip, which could explain why there were no footprints in her room. He was familiar with the layout of the house and the prosecution suggested that he had sedated his wife on the night of the murders, enabling him to leave the house undetected. His jealousy of the Lin family and their successful business compared to his own business failings and financial issues was seen as a motive. However, Robert's defence team claimed that there must have been more than one killer, and it would have been physically impossible for 5 foot 7 inch, 60 kilograms Robert to restrain, attack and kill 5 people by himself. They disputed the DNA evidence which had been presented by the prosecution and claimed that Robert had only disposed of the shoebox because he feared being falsely implicated. Kathy stood by her husband, stating that she believed he was totally innocent and that he was being framed for the murders. In December 2015, 10 months after the start of the trial and following 11 days of deliberations, the jury confirmed that they could not reach an agreement. The jury were dismissed and the trial was rescheduled. Meanwhile, Robert was granted bail. A new trial began in June 2016, and once again the jury struggled to come to a unanimous agreement. Justice Fullerton decided to accept a majority verdict. After 8 days of deliberations, it was agreed by an 11-1 majority that Robert was guilty of 5 counts of murder. On the 13th of February 2017, he received 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. It was later revealed that the 2013 trial was delayed because of the emergence of evidence of sexual abuse committed by Robert. Although anonymous at the time, the victim would later speak out about her ordeal. It was Brenda Lin. Robert, her uncle, was obsessed with her and had been abusing her before the murders and continued to do so after he had murdered her entire family and Brenda had moved into his house. The judge at Robert's sentencing addressed the evidence of sexual assault, stating that his depraved obsession with Brenda drove him to kill her entire family so that she would end up isolated and living under his roof. In February 2021, Robert's appeal was dismissed and he remains behind bars. Kathy continues to believe in his innocence. That concludes today's case on the Lin family. Just a quick thanks to Orangi93 for suggesting this case to me. Also, if you fancy listening to any more Australian cases, I've covered quite a few now. In fact, an Australian man called Rodney Marks is my second highest viewed case. I'll make a playlist of these cases. Please like, comment and subscribe and tell others about the channel. Thanks so much to everyone for all the recent support. It really is appreciated. Thanks very much for listening to The Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. Did you know that 90% of Australians live on the coast? What interesting facts can you share about Australia? Goodbye.